Jeremy Lockhorn with Razorfish. I'm the VP of Emerging Media and the US Mobile Lead there, and I'm here at CES with ARF.
How did you come to be here, 2016 at CES?
I've been at Razorfish for almost 20 years. This is
Congratulations.
January. Thank you. Yeah. And they keep
It's like my career, but not that many people do that anymore.
I know, it's usually you're hopping around.
Especially in digital.
Yes, exactly. But you know, I've loved my job since the day I started. And I've had the opportunity to work with great brands.
I'm sure there were certain points in time where you had, disappointment or failure. How did you decide to hang in?
I truly believe that we have the opportunity every day to do something that has never been done before, right? And our clients ask that of us, right?
Yes.
And we push on them just as hard as they're pushing on us. And so when you're doing that stuff, that kind of truly innovative work, stuff that's never been done before, you're going to fail. You just have to go into it with this knowledge that maybe 9 times out of 10, you're not going to nail it, right? Something is going to go wrong or a little bit sideways, or it may be a complete failure.
Now, one of the things I've been so impressed with in what's been published about you and what you've published, Jeremy, is already being very strategic about how clients are allocating their budgets and what percent of clients, and actually starting up a conversation about what percent of clients have set aside a separate mobile budget or a separate digital budget or a separate, what inspired that level of strategic thinking?
You know, a lot of people will just say follow the eyeballs, right? And as media consumption changes and people are, watching video on mobile phones, for example, you have to be there and you have to allocate the right amount of their budget. But there's a weird nuance to it or a trick to it, which is the other argument you hear a lot with, especially when it comes to mobile, is, and this is still true, and the stat has been thrown around for the last 2 or 3 years in terms of time spent on mobile versus the ad dollars, and the ratio is just totally out of whack,
yes,
right? It's significantly smaller, right?
Yes. No matter how you look at it, people can argue over the data sources. But
right.
Yes.
Exactly. But I don't mean to completely dismiss that, but I think that you can't just look at time spent. You've got to look at other factors in the channel to determine what that allocation ought to be like. And that, I guess, is sort of how we try to approach it from a strategic perspective, is looking at not only what is time spent, what is the scale of the channel, but what are the opportunities to really engage the right audience, and is there an opportunity for my client's brand to deliver value in that context? And if there's not, then it can be a challenge.
Is your perspective that creative should be different across touch points, or do you think it should be customized to the touch point?
What I would say is that I think you need a sound idea that is sort of independent of channel. And so, if you think about the old way that creative was done, TV was the big dog, right? And so everything started with the 30-second spot, and that was the core of the idea. And then everything sort of cascaded from that, Out of home ties into that campaign theme. We would always do takedowns of the TV idea for digital, et cetera. And that's really obviously changed over the last few years. And it's flipped where the TV is not the core of the idea. The core of the idea is just, what's the story? What's the value that I want to deliver? And then how does that manifest itself across all of the different channels? And so I would say once you have that idea, that foundation, then it's a best practice, whenever possible from my perspective, to leverage the unique capabilities of the channel that you're deploying to, right? So on TV, it's going to be a linear 30-second spot.
Interesting.
On the web, desktop web, maybe it starts to be something that's invites more participation, whether that's via a social campaigin or even interactive video, right?
Could be gamification.
Right, exactly. And then when it comes to mobile, you start to think about unique capabilities of that device, right? It's got a microphone. Can we actually have the consumer talk to us, right? Can we use the accelerometer to create some sort of 360, as I move the phone around, the experience changes, or that becomes a way to interact with the experience. So those, I think the idea can be thematically similar across all of those channels, but you get the best engagement if you're able to really kind of leverage those unique capabilities, because increasingly that's how consumers are engaging with other types of content on the device. And if the ad experience is not delivering on that, or the marketing experience is not delivering on that, then there's a disconnect with how they expect to engage with that.
What's your prediction for 2016?
What we're going to see is growth in the importance of context.
Okay.
And it's something that, it's a trend that's been building over the last couple of years. But when I say the importance of context or the growth of context, specifically when I'm talking about, it's especially true on mobile, it's true across all channels, but the mobile device really is where it shines, right? And the device is so good at knowing you, its owner, right? Like it has your calendar, it has your contacts, it knows all of that about you, and it knows where you're at, it knows the weather where you're at, it knows what time of day it is, all of these things, right? And it's those kinds of inputs that are enabling things like Google Now to tell you, you've got a flight, the traffic between here and there is X, you need to leave in the next 10 minutes to make your flight on time, right? Like you get that proactive push alert. And so the device is getting so good at knowing your context that it's actually starting to deliver what you want before you even ask for it, right? It comes back to the predictive thing that we were talking about before. And so I think, both Android and iOS announced new features with Marshmallow and iOS 9, where at the OS level, that stuff is going to be built in and become more pervasive. So it's going to take the expectation from a consumer perspective in terms of the device's ability to deliver contextually relevant information from here to here, right? And we as marketers, I think, have to be well aware of that. Again, because if we're not meeting that expectation of every other interaction that's happening on the phone, then we're just going to get dismissed, and it could actually be a negative brand experience. So I think that's the biggest one. And I'll close out with a quote that I always like to use that sort of supports this point from Howard Gossage, who's one of my advertising heroes. He was an ad man in the 50s. But he's got this one great quote that supports contextual relevance really well, and that is, people don't read advertising, they read what interests them, and sometimes it's an ad, right? And to me, that's just, if you can deliver something that's so relevant and provides enough value, it ceases to be advertising, it just becomes content or an experience. And is not perceived as advertising. And that's when the magic really happens, and I think that's the opportunity that we have, given how much the device knows about you and our ability as marketers to leverage that context to deliver that relevance.
So Jeremy, your company's really lucky to have you, Razorfish, and it's really been a pleasure to speak with you.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.
Yeah.